we have the new documentary Disclosure, which is all about trans representation in the media. Yeah, so what stood out for you in this film?
I think for
Mm.
me, it was eye-opening because there's so many things you don't consider when you're not a part of that community. It's
Mhm.
like, which is, I guess, my privilege, obviously, but it's like you don't even realize how damaging or how disparaging those types of things can be. And not saying that I even, of course, we've all seen things, but it's not saying that I have negative view of trans people. But I think it's just that, and you don't even realize all the things that you are again ingesting, or how those things can maybe impact or influence your thinking. Of how trans characters can be made out to be a negative person, or there's typically this the big reveal that she's a man. Not saying that she is, that's how a lot of shows have framed it, in the documentary they were saying. And
Mhm.
it's that almost using their identity or their bodies for a plot point
Mhm.
instead of them being like fully realized people and
For
characters.
me personally, it really kind of like underlined that idea of how powerful media can be, as a step towards really understanding people and their experiences. I
Hmm.
believe it was the Jen Richards that was saying, like, so what they see is just these, these cis men putting on a dress, putting on a wig, and then like taking it off. Then in their minds, it sort of becomes like, oh, well, this isn't real. Like anyone who
Yeah.
says that they're with a trans person, they know a trans person, oh, they're just gay, or oh, they're just talking about a dude in a dress, basically. So it sort of creates that stereotype and it creates that sort of violence that then leads to real world violence. So that was really empowering for me to see, because I think, well, really for any of us as people who create media, who do different sort of stories and media platforms, what have you, like that's kind of a almost a call to arms for some of it for us.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think what really stood out for me was how they had this whole conversation about race and how that was, and it showed
Mm-hmm.
how tightly linked it was to how racism and transphobia in the media has it's been so closely linked. The whole way that the larger black community views LGBTQ,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole emasculation of men argument.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it kind of originates here, right? And I thought that it was good that they acknowledged the argument about the emasculation of black men through through racism,
Mm-hmm.
through lynching, and the whole everything that people would do. But then also how that gets confused with transness or
Mm-hmm.
homosexuality.
Hmm.
I thought that was a really interesting. I thought that was a really interesting point. I would like to ask you guys, because I know we are all storytellers on this call. Would this documentary maybe impact the way that you tell stories moving forward?
Like kind of gave me more of a platform to stand on, more of a concrete idea about how media sort of affects like real world interactions and reactions to people.
Hmm.
So in that aspect, it kind of made me just like, yeah, this stuff is important. Like it's important to to try to represent people fully, what have you. But it also made me sit back and have to kind of evaluate my own writing, because to ask yourself, okay, well, are you contributing to this in any way? Like look back at what you created. Do you feel are you contributing to this? Is there a space where you can, if you are, if you aren't, is there a space where you can maybe contribute to the solution? Like, is there any way where you could, try to create a more, I guess, a more inclusive, I guess that would be the way I can frame this, a more inclusive space to where you are not demonizing trans people, or at the very least,
Hmm.
not demonizing sort of like gender variance in general, to make that into a sort of a welcoming space for people to understand more about sort of gender variance, gender fluidity, whatever have you. So for me, it did kind of make me kind of sit back and think for a minute as far as like what it is that I was doing with my own writing.
Yeah. I think for me, I definitely am now more aware and more conscious to be, like you're saying, too, as inclusive. But it is still, I got to be careful to not do it again for a plot point. And not saying that I would do those type of reveals or twists, but to make sure those still is organic to the story. And also, though, I think, at least for me personally, I don't know anyone, at least to my knowledge, in real life who is. So I feel like I seem to be missing some maybe nuances or something like that. So I still would want to learn a bit more so that I'm not, because sometimes when you feel people including things like, okay, we checked out this diversity box, check out this box, we have one of
Right.
these, one of the type of person, one of that type of character, whatever. So I wouldn't want to do that. I would still want it to be something that fits. But absolutely though, open my eyes that, to me, at least, to be more inclusive where I can be.
Right. I think that that's something that has been talked about to death on book Twitter. Where I'm kind of, I have my foot in that side of Twitter. There are a lot of well-meaning authors out there who try to include other people, but maybe they don't necessarily get it all the way right because they haven't necessarily done the research that it takes in order to fully flesh out a character. Would you say, as writers, that if you can't do the research, or if you can't really get deep into the culture of a certain character, would that character just kind of be how you see your other friends or anything like that? I mean, would that be appropriate?
I think it is if you humanize them, but I think you have to be careful to not maybe miss nuances that might be there. But if you don't know that they're missing, then you would miss them, obviously. I think that's why it's important maybe to have other readers or collaborators in a way that you can.
I'm trying to make sure I'm 100% getting the question.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, like, if a white author decides to write a Black character, and that Black character, you could pretty much put, white skin on and it would be the same thing. Would that be appropriate? I mean, because we know that there are different types of people within cultures, so that, I don't know.
Okay, I see what you're saying now. Okay. I think that when you trying to represent people, like that are outside of your lived experience, it's important to kind of like what Brandon was saying, kind of get input at the very least from people who that is their lived experience, because without the nuances, without the little what people call the cultural beats, that kind of doesn't really do a lot. I think as far as the representation that people are actually looking for, I think about it like this. Like when I wrote my second book, I had a reader come up to me, like shake my hand, and said like, "Oh my God, thank you." And I was like, "What do you thank? You're welcome. What am I getting thankful?" And she was explaining that, whenever I read about Black women in these type of stories, in these fantasy stories, they're out and about, or they always talk about that when they go to sleep, they just put their head on the pillow and go straight to sleep. And it was like, that's not what happens. And in the story, she was like, I was so glad to hear you talking about how before this character went to sleep, she was in the bathroom, she was twisting up her hair, she wrapped up her head, and then she lay down and went to sleep. It's like those type of small things, those type of like nuances and like cultural sort of aspects is what makes these characters feel authentic.
That actually reminds me of the scene, I think in season 1 of How to Get Away with Murder, where Annalise is taking everything off and breaking it down for bed, and and it was just so special because it's like, you don't ever see that, but that's real.
I think that, when we're talking about, particularly when we're talking about like we're trans characters, I think something that I think it was Jen Richards that was saying on the documentary, just sort of saying like, there's a difference between a person who's playing a trans character who then has to kind of like put all of their effort into like showing you, or like, I guess, the physicality of being that they're trans. And but there's a difference between that and someone who is trans, who that comes naturally to, who now they can start putting some of that like acting energy into, like the other aspects of their personality. So it is important, like even and then there are nuances, like, like there are nuances to people's experiences that, oftentimes going to look, I'm not trans, so I can't speak to what those nuances are. But I think that's the point, like we're not going to know it until you open up, until you take the opportunity to kind of to talk to people from this group, to talk to trans people, and to get them, paying them, to kind of to help you to get and create the world that you want to create.